All right. Our first French salon in Australia. So I'm just going to introduce us first so we kind of know who we are. I know some of you know each other, but so this is Jack, and he's thinking of doing a PhD in comparative religions. And we were chatting the other day and saying it'd be more fun to do it in the spaces rather than in just the theory of it. And Anne and I have been having these thoughts for a while. It'd be great to get a group of people together who discuss philosophical, spiritual, and artistic things like the old French salons. And so we've wondered about combining Jack's question with our French salon idea. Okay. Now I'm going to just give a really quick. Alfred is been Buddhist, because Jack doesn't know everyone, has been Buddhist and clear vision. So Western esoteric training is the main. If I'm saying it wrong, you can, pull me up. I'm clear vision trained, but I've got a lot of Aboriginal things. Oliver's also clear vision trained, but he's also done a lot of shamanism. Would that be the right way? And other substances, maybe?
Yeah, and now I'm doing humanistic Buddhism at Nantian. So I've got more. My mind is exploding. It's emptying. It's a better term.
Yeah, and Anne is I don't know how many years, Anne, sorry, but a lot of years as a Taoist, and run a temple in Hong Kong for 15 years. So there you are. That's a basic thing. And Jack, what do we say about you, Jack?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I don't really know anymore. I guess started out as a Catholic. I would probably still say I'm a practicing Catholic, but not in the way that most people would use that terminology. But yeah, I think like a few people on the call just been sort of dipping my toe and foot into various ponds, which has been a fun experience. So yeah, as much as you have to classify, I'll go with Roman Catholic.
Righto. And so I think I've got two questions, and I thought the first one would be to you guys: is it possible, as just a place to start, and we can go wherever we want, but is it possible for someone to do a real comparison, experiential comparison of the different systems? Like spend 3 months doing Western esoterics, 3 months doing Taoism, 3 months doing Buddhism, just for example. That was my question. Is it possible?
Depends upon your frame of reference.
So,
well, if you wanted to, I was just listening to an ABC podcast of a woman who wrote something on China, and she was there at the same time I was in China. I agreed with virtually everything I said because my knowledge was superficial, except when she talked about Taoism. And then it showed me that her knowledge was superficial. So it totally depends on your frame of reference and what your intended outcome is.
By the way, hello, Anne. Haven't seen you since our soiree. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, it's good to see you.
Mm.
Well, there was
frame of reference was what I got from that, Oliver.
Yeah, in the Buddhist ethics subject I just completed, or pending the 2 papers handing over, is that there was an article that talked about the difference between interpretation and explication, and this is by an Indian scholar, and he's saying that many scholarships are stuck in the interpretation. So you're getting Indian system of ethics. They're trying to interpret it through the lens of consequentialism, the ontology from the Western frame. And he's saying you can do that, but then you're kind of limited by the lens you use in the interpretation. What he's saying is it's better to just explicate each system. So
What does it mean, explicate? What's it mean?
Yeah, it means that, for example, this is the system of, let's say, Buddhism. You can explain their logic according to their logic, not if it fits your logic. Because what we're trying to do is, oh, the Buddhists, they're a bit, or the Theravada Buddhism, they're a bit the ontology, because, or no, they're virtue ethics, because they say if you're good, then good things will come. You know, so you're trying to fit it with another frame. Whereas explicate, you explain their own system and you do it side by side. And he's saying that, which I can't agree. That's what the objective is.
Did you say you can agree or you can't agree?
I agree.
Okay.
I see what he's saying, and I don't know why it never clicked on me before, but it clicked when he said that's what the objective is. We can have an objective discussion. Like if we're looking at the apple, we don't see the same apple because we're from different places, but we can discuss it because we actually are seeing it from different perspectives. It's quite interesting.
So you're discussing perspectives.
Yeah. So it's what is he saying? I'll get the code, but it's like the objective is where we converge, where our differences converge. Which is quite interesting because sometimes the lay understanding of objective is it's the truth, but no, it's where we converge with our differences. It's a different way of looking at it.
So would that be like you would have to get into the Buddhist system, use that as sort of your point of reference, and then you can sort of consider the system from within the system.
So you do that, yeah. You explain it according to their own explanation, and then you do the Gnostics according to their explanation, and you put them side by side and see where they converge, where the differences.
Also, I think according to their own pedagogical style.
Yeah.
There's an organization called Yogic Studies that give really good, very affordable webinars online. And I just did one on Bhakti. And this fellow, an Englishman, has been studying the Bhakti tradition for 40 odd years. And he gave what to me, and he acknowledged it, was a very traditional exegesis. And for a Westerner, it was like, what? You're just reading me the text. You're reading me the text that I already have a copy of, and you're just elaborating here and there. Now, that's the traditional way I learned martial arts. I learned without deviating exactly what the master told me. And from that, there is an inner realization that happens because you're doing it you're learning, in fact, according to that tradition. You're being taught according to that tradition. So you're within it, like you're talking about. And from that perspective, we can go into it and we can come out of it, you know? Yeah.
I would regard this a matter of form. It's like adopting the form.
And so,
there's a kind of fun sort of field of exploration at Claire Vision School with characters where you adopt the cloak of the character.
So maybe just explain that a bit more, Alfred, so Anne and Jack understand.
I don't know that my explanation is correct or not, because my knowledge is somewhat limited on that topic, but my understanding is there's an overlap with, say, the Jungian notion of subpersonalities. Or if we're looking at performance models, we might look at our different roles, different characters that we adopt for different tasks in life. And we can kind of adopt the form of the character to explore different aspects of our psyche.
Can I cut to the chase?
Yeah, do.
So if you're, I'm going to be rude, a kind of, maybe I won't be, if you're a very uptight person who's who's paranoid about everything and controlling and only ever wears grey, right? You adopt a red curly wig, full on makeup, bright purple and bright red clothes, and you become flamboyant. You do it as an act of will. So you become flamboyant and wild for a week, right? Like people do all sorts of things. Someone who's never thought of mothering adopts the character of an expectant mother. And one said she went to work and her bosses all thought she was having a baby.
Yeah.
So one of those characters is the spiritual character.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you're adopting the form, you can kind of adopt the spiritual character of that particular form for a while.
But that you've got to
what's
also
amazing is how you find yourself in a character and you're actually conditioned by the form. Like you're saying, it's like doing certain kinds of experimental theatre. And you know, you're in the character and it gives you permission to play.
So Jack then takes on the form of each one for a while and becomes you know, becomes the ideal Buddhist or whatever for a little while, but Jack is always in there.
Yeah.
That's right. It depends on the level that you're operating on. There's an aphorism in my tradition, is the form will take you to the formless. And so when there's a merging into the oneness, then there is no Jack or Anne or Helen, you know, there is that merging. But most of us, necessarily by the nature of our world, we don't operate at that level, and we can't for any length of time be one with everything that is.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because that would point to the next sort of logical level on that exercise. So we become crystallized and identified with our characterological fixations. And so by adopting these different perspectives, these different characters, if you like, it does enable the possibility of dropping those rigidified forms, because you start to realize that you are not the form.
Yeah.
When I discussed this with you as an option, Alfred, you had an incredibly Alfred way of saying it. It was something to, but I asked the question, will Jack go mad? Right? Because
oh yeah, go for it.
Because like identity, you know, who you think you are is you know, you said it very eloquently, Alfred, and I don't know whether you can remember what you said, but we were talking about that identity rests on beliefs and rests on there's a whole construction of what in clear vision model you'd call the astral body, right? Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. So there's a whole construction around who am I in that enables you to navigate through life. And one of the things that we want consistency in that. We want to be consistent in our experience. And so if you know, you become, let's just use the character example, you become a financial magnate 1 minute and then a spiritual person the next, all your friends go, he's gone nuts, you know, because they can't identify. There's still you, the I am, if you like, in there, but you aren't. And so if you go into one and then another that all rest on different beliefs and you really embody them, that was my question. Does Jack, you know, could you go nuts? Would it go nuts?
Or alternatively, like does like progress or success in one system preclude any sort of preclude you from like understanding or getting involved in the next system? Like if you do
I can imagine, I was thinking about this, I can imagine Samuel saying something like, you're going to spend 3 months trying to be a ballet dancer, and then you're going to spend 3 months trying to learn the piano, and then you're going to spend 3 months trying to be a boxer. Just like each will shape your subtle bodies, each will shape your consciousness, and yeah, I don't know.
This is I think where, or I feel, although my Buddhist studies haven't been that deep yet, where there's a branching off. I think with clear vision, it's more based on the Hindu model of there's an Atman, there's a body of immortality, the changeless one. Whereas Buddhism is opposite.
That's right. Here's where the comparison becomes fascinating, especially when we want to try and maintain a non-dualistic standpoint. So what is everybody pointing to? Because the Western mysticism and Hinduism and just about every other teaching in the world points to an eternal element.
Yeah, except
we have
Buddhism.
Atman, we have the higher self, we have ego, whatever you want to call this.
So what do we have in Buddhism?
We have anatta, not self. The Buddha calls the wrong view of eternalism.
But what really, and I'm actually doing some research on it, diving. He talked about the pratitya samupada, the dependent co-arising. It's like, whoa,
chitta, yeah,
yeah. It's like so with the everything, which it's actually very scientific. So everything everything I know, it's also very epistemological. Everything I know come from my senses, and they consider the 5 senses, and there's a 6th sense, which is the mental. And then what, again, remember, Helen, we were discussing about, so there's the object and then there's the subject, but what may be primary is the relationship. It's the same here. In the co-arising, cognition arises when there's a grasper grasping the object being perceived. So they co-arise. You cannot separate it, because when you separate it, the cognition drops. So there's no self. That's
This is the tree falling in the forest. Go on.
No, it's even different. It's a bit like the story of Bodhidharma when someone wanted to learn from him, and then he said, he cut his hand, and I said, all right, you've proven you're serious. And I said, oh yeah, I want to get enlightened. He said, all right, show me your mind, put it on the table, and then we can talk. And then he got enlightened, because at the heart of it, this thing we call the self is empty. It's just a convergence of conditions and causation going back since all of this started. And the beauty of that is it actually makes choice better, because that's why the Mahayana moved into compassion. If I have no self, why should I do good, right? And who would be reborn when I die, because it's not eternal? It's because then what I do now will be part of the co-arising of the next wave, of the next, what I mean? So I have to be careful. But if you study complexity science, like the butterfly effect, even the smallest thing can have this huge repercussion. So that's why if I want to be ethical, I have to watch what I do, because it will ripple off to other beings who may suffer because of what I do. It's not because I want to save myself. It's not because, it's a totally different thing. Like when I was in clear vision, I want a body of immortality. Well, this is different.
And this is like, there's no such thing.
It's totally different. Yeah. The real difficulty here, Oliver, is that sorry, is there more to say?
I just wanted to, as an addendum, having said that, Buddhism is a big landscape. There are parts of Buddhism who eventually created an afterlife too, like with the Pure Lands, with Amitabha, because they merged with the local religions. I think the Gautama's insight is because he responds to, he's more of a psychologist, but what suffering, he's actually addressing that. So he just said, it's a bit like Descartes, but a bigger Descartes, because Descartes, he narrowed what he can doubt, whereas Buddha expanded it.
The real the real difficulty we have here, Oliver, is these are you there? You seem to have frozen. You still with us?
His reception. Yeah. Okay.
Hello. Yeah. The real difficulty, as I see it here, is that these contemplations belong to, there are 4 foundations of mindfulness, and this belongs to the 4th foundation of mindfulness, a group of meditative contemplations. They are not philosophical statements. It's not meant to be a matter of philosophical consideration. It's meant to be something to be realized for ourselves. So a bit like when Samuel talks about a language to map consciousness. We're talking about states of consciousness that you've actualized, that you've realized, where you're seeing this for yourself. You're not in the conceptual mind at all. Your mind is completely silent. It's been at this level, the mind has gone through, like, you know, such profound levels of deepening into inner silence that this direct knowledge is only accessible when the mind is completely absent. And so it's got nothing at all to do with philosophy. And understanding the theory is useful, but only in as much as it points to an experience.
So with that, Alfred, would you say that there's no, like, even if this idea is possible, it's not worthwhile because the point at which you would want to arrive at is inexpressible, and
You can only get there through practice.
But although having said that, because I sit in meditation every morning.
Yes.
So since I did the Buddhism theory, I try to apply it. You know, with clear vision, I was, you know, in the Thunder one or in the Atom. So I said, since I was learning Buddhism, I'm gonna meditate from that conception. So I'm not trying to hone in on subtle bodies, but to actually see the conditioning. So I've changed the way I meditate just to see what it's like, and it's different. So you can do that. So, you know, I'm doing comparative practice.
Yeah. Once it's practice, that's takes you through it, doesn't it? I don't know how many of you have experienced when there's a kind of dissolving of the boundaries of self, and you become one with everything, and it's like waves and waves of, you get into these mystical states for weeks on end, and that, you know,
I mean, what I was wondering about before, with what Oliver was, well, both of you are bringing really, was to experience the states. Jack would, for any religion, Jack needs to still his mind, right? And he needs a basic practice, you know, to
the essence of all practices is to stop the internal dialogue. That's the only function the practices have.
But like I did Vipassana before, a couple of Vipassanas before I did clear vision, and it's got a very different way of approaching it. And like Oliver was just saying, with the two, because clear vision is very focused, so it's about you focus your awareness somewhere, you actively focus your awareness, and rather than trying to stop the mind, you don't worry about it. You just keep coming back to the practice, and it's all about focus. Now, I don't know if one of you can explain.
That's standard samadhi practice. That's the function of samadhi. We want to focus one-pointed. Concentration is the foundation of insight. So the stronger your focus, the deeper your insight.
In that system, but then
Anne's
got a very, okay, well,
Anne has something.
Yeah, Anne has a very different way of, from my
not so different from Alfred. As a general principle, that's true. And when you focus on anything, eventually you will dissolve into it. And what you were saying before about the use of pursuing a study or a doctorate in this area. First of all, it's a personal use, I think, to try and get one's head around one's personal practice and the phenomena that arise out of it. But the word focus or concentration has two possible uses. One is to will a certain state into being, and one is to yield into the focus. You can try and use your intellectual mind to bend a spoon or something like that. That's concentration, but it's not got a spiritual purpose. It's got a willful human ego purpose. But if you
powers.
Exactly, cities. But if you are focusing on the breath, on the light, on the movement of the water in a yielding way, then my experience is you'll be taken into it and into that oneness because of that focus. So two different forms of concentration.
Samuel puts that nicely, and he calls the yang one the Martian will, and the yin one the Venusian will. And Venus can penetrate anything.
Yeah. So Jack, I haven't heard what you want to do exactly from your mouth, out of your mouth.
Yeah. So the idea, as I sort of conceive it to be, would be to do practices in a series of different religions that are quite sort of different, I suppose. Try and make it as different as possible and as accessible as possible. And then go through the practice of sort of living as an adherent of that religion. And I think the conversation so far has been about sort of achieving the goal of that religion at sort of a mystical end, which I think with some of the religions that would come about. But I think with some of the others, it would be about going through the practice itself, religions that are more sort of, I guess, practically focused, where you'd sort of do specific things throughout the day. And so it would be trying to immerse myself into that religion for a period of time, take on, I suppose, the cloak or the character of being that adherent. And then I guess it's about just seeing what happens, seeing the feeling that I get in those different religions, and trying to come to a bit of an understanding of the differences between them and the differences between how the practices affect the person.
My teachers would say that that would be like digging a series of shallow wells, hoping to get water. That's what my teachers would say. That for my experience is that you have to have a depth of personal practice if you want to get to anything juicy. Even if it's phenomenological for a period of 3 months or 6 months, to do a series of practices from different traditions, that's not long enough. That's not long enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to ask Jack why.
Yeah.
I think there's a selfish reason that I would love to have the experiences of those different faiths, meet people from those different faiths, try and understand them better. There's an intellectual curiosity of understanding them as best as I can. But I think as well, it's also seeing, where the glove fits and saying, I like that, I don't like that. This works for me. And then after the PhD is finished, after the comparative period has finished, you could, deep dive into something, or you could begin to sort of develop a bit of a mix of different things that you've liked to develop that real personal practice.
It appears to me that no, I don't want to appear too challenging or rude, but
Please.
there's what you're yearning for is what you're stopping yourself from having by doing a relatively, and it's quite worthy. You get a PhD to do it, you know. They give you the go ahead to do it, but been doing those relatively limited comparative practices, what your soul is yearning for won't get answered.
Yeah, and I think that's yeah, no, I think you're right, and that would be sort of a concern and potentially a reason not to do it. I wonder if though that the intellectual stimulation of doing it, even at the base level, would be enough to achieve a level of satisfaction.
Enough to find that glove. Enough to find that glove.
Enough to find the glove. Yeah, I mean, if it's 4 years of a PhD to find the right glove, then I would think it would be worth it. And I've been looking into this sort of stuff for a while, and I haven't really seen anyone that's done what I'm sort of, I guess, proposing to do.
You might want to check out. There's a book in my queue. I haven't read it, but I've heard the author talk about it. It's called Recapturing the Rapture by Jamie Will. What it's tried to do is abstract from what's useful from the religion minus all the stories.
Yeah.
And then and see, yeah, because he's also one of the co-authors of Stealing Fire. So that one I've listened to as an audiobook. And in that one, they abstracted what is in flow and psychedelics and high performance people. And that's why Prometheus stole the fire. So they found out what is this common thread that people who are like the Navy SEALs, the elite of the Navy SEALs, the elite athletes, what is common. So I think it's similar in the vein you're trying to do, what cuts across religion. I think it's doing that with this next book, but in the context of saving civilization from killing itself. Because the theory is when we killed God, Nietzsche, we become lost because the religious instinct is in us.
Yeah.
And it just reorients somewhere else. It reorients an ideology, and it's putting us close to extinction and war because there's nothing higher. We just like, you have that instinct, religious instincts go somewhere, and it's trying to capture, can we recapture that religious instinct without some guy or girl or guru controlling everyone? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think like
sorry.
In sort of like flowing on from that idea, another reason to do it would be to sort of show a level of similarity that exists between some of these practice. And I guess it would be bad sort of scholarship to go in with the purpose of trying to do that. But if you could tease that out in a way and show people that there's not these crazy differences that appear at first instance between these different practices, and to try and find a level of cohesion between them.
On a more frivolous note, I've come up with an idea for a name for your PhD. Or it could even be a novel. The Joys of Spiritual Tourism. And I also have a question. How do you qualify something as a religion as distinct from a cult?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a good cult.
Culture comes from cult.
Cult comes from culture. Are you kind of so open to experimentation that you're prepared to be brainwashed to the extent that you might not get out.
Oh,
I'm going to try a few months in Scientology, for example.
yeah. Sign my house over to Scientologists.
Or Nexium. Have you seen that documentary and that thing in America called Nexium? Wow, it's amazing.
Nexium.
Mm.
No, I don't know.
Hmm?
What is that? What is that?
It's a recent cult where this guy, through a series of events, convinced women to brand themselves.
Oh.
So it was an interesting.
It was a series on SBS, which I caught up with on the Catch Up app, and it had that one was the first one and the most terrific, and then there were a series of others that were very, very interesting as far as looking at cults.
And it was called Nexium.
Yeah, and he wasn't. I looked at the guy. He wasn't impressive. It's so weird how I wonder how he did it. It's like there must be.
There's strange charisma. Some of these people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, Anne pointed to cities.
Yeah.
When you do enough meditation in the concentration side, you can develop the psychic powers, and they can be like Svengali. You can really hypnotize people with those powers.
Yeah, I think he's in jail now, that guy.
Coming back to what was I wanting to come back to? I've forgotten. I just talk.
What did you want to come back to, Anne?
I don't want to come back.
I know, she had a good point.
I know what to come back to. I was depending where one's comfort level lies or one's interest at a certain time, an intellectual pursuit is exciting. There's nothing more seductive for me than a good intellectual stimulating conversation. But what I've found in my life is that the depth of my spiritual practice will enable me to recognize another person who's had a similar depth of practice in their tradition.
Yeah.
And Helen and I do it all the time. We do a translation. Oh, you call it this, I call it that. You have this. And again and again throughout my life, I meet someone from different traditions and we recognize each other because of the depth of our own practice. So that is a proof for me that all roads lead to Rome or to the top of the mountain.
See, I guess that's what I was wanting to question, because in the comparative religion thing, or there's an assumption that the human condition is the same at some point or in some way. And like, you know, the idea that it's the void and then you're a projection of the one, I'm another projection. My experience is true for me. Your experience is true for you. But you tell a very different story to me. And it's only through the combination of everybody that we actually know the truth. Like that's a notion resting on, you know, Plato's one or whatever. You know, there's lots of people who say and my experience would suggest that as well. Like I've had experiences where I feel like I'm one with everything. I'm part of one life, or I am the one life. But there is an assumption, or maybe not but there is an inherent assumption in comparing religions that there is something that's similar across all of them.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of difference.
You're a fan of difference?
Yeah, I don't think they all lead to the same place at all.
Well, actually, we discussed this with Samuel one night, and he said, no, they don't. But he said, once you get to the top, he said,
yes, they do.
Like really, really the top kind of thing. He said, who can answer those questions anyway?
Yeah, it's like splitting hairs.
And also, like when I was talking to you about my 5 Mayo DMT experience, in that space, it's not possible to talk. So you can't talk about it.
But you're right about it afterwards.
It's so opposite to clear vision Buddhism. In Buddhism, you don't discuss your experience with anyone. You go and do a 1-month silent retreat. You have an interview with the Burmese master. In the morning, he asks you to report your experience. He asks you if you paid close attention to it. He said, pay closer attention. Very good. Please continue.
And then you go back for another month. It was like
Jack.
Vipassana. I went in I think it was my first one, and I was a bit afraid of going mad, actually. And I went and said that something to him, and he went, oh, let it come, let it go. It's all, like this. And I went,
I like that cloak, Helen.
you like what?
Your cloak when you were doing that impression.
That
that's a cloak.
Yeah.
You could take this to a whole other level, Jack, and just start in the full knowledge. You could take the Dzogchen non-dualistic perspective and in the full knowledge that the self-perfected state doesn't need any improvement.
And hand in an empty PhD. Here's 200 white pages. Yeah.
There's two interesting things I came across: Dzogchen master Namkhai Norbu, and a book called The 11th Hour about the life story of Swami Rama. And both these guys have got this incredible capacity for integration. So they can just flow into any situation and pretty much instantaneously master it.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're sort of talking about, Anne, where you just like, once you get to a stage, there's just that recognition, and you're there and you get it.
Enlightened state, the recognition of the depth of the other and the commonalities along the way. So what I'm saying is an individual gets it through their individual practice in one tradition and can recognize another individual who's got it from a different practice within a different tradition. And that's where that points to that oneness, that possibility of the commonality of the oneness of something.
Okay, I want to share an experience because in a way it answers one thing we're talking about. When I did Vipassana, so it was the first sort of fairly serious thing I'd done. And I remember looking at the master and thinking I could see through him. He was like water, like I could have put my hand right through him, right? I went to Clear Vision and I sat in front of Andrea, for those of you who know her, and I tuned into her, and it was like sitting in front of a telegraph pole, right? I couldn't have knocked her over with a Mack truck. She was only, she's like my size. She's not big or anything, but her energy was solid and present, and here, and that's what we're talking about with the different paths, that you're not going to get Andrea's level of density from a couple of weeks or whatever, like Andrea's been doing it for probably 30 years, I think now, but at that stage it would have been 10 years anyway. And the Vipassana master, likewise, you're not going to get what he had through, just a couple of Vipassanas or whatever, depending on obviously how you do it. But that's the thing that's really interesting. And one of the things, going to see spiritual masters, real ones who've got, like Amma, for example, just being in her presence and feeling what her energy is like versus others can tell you a whole lot about the religion, or about.
Yes, and it's transformative. To be in the presence of such a master is transformative in and of itself.
But that experience just indicates that your practice will shape your body of energy. It will change your body of energy. That's why I was asking the question, would he go
difference?
Yeah, go nuts doing it. I'm sort of asking it in a light way, but it's because of that,
Yeah. And one of the things I haven't mentioned is that while doing this, I would try and find a master or someone that's been practicing for a long time and do an interview with them and get as many people as I can, and try and structure it that you're asking similar questions, and try and, I guess, get a depth of analysis that way, to try and, I guess, supplement the I guess mediocre practice that I might be able to do in a short period of time.
This has been done, but in another domain, but also of practice. So maybe you can discover something from that. It's called mixed MMA.
All right, yeah.
Right? MMA mixes, like all the martial arts without losing the purity of each one. They were able to do it, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you could look into that. How did that happen?
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, because the really good MMA fighters have trained in multiple martial arts deeply, not just superficially. Otherwise, you'll just get knocked out.
Yeah. But that being said, Oliver, like the guys that are the best at that they've all got one that's their one, and they've like that's their rock on which they then build some other strong like foundations from.
But the other ones are not like superficial as well.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
back to Anne's point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's what Anne was saying earlier.
Yes.
I was doing a retreat with Joseph Goldstein. He used that same metaphor. He said you can drill 1,000 holes a meter deep if you're looking for water, but get frustrated after the first meter, go and dig somewhere else, or you can just keep digging in the same spot and you'll end up 1,000 meters deep.
Although we have to mention Zen, which is the school of sudden enlightenment. It can happen like that.
Yeah.
Or it can be sitting 10 years, nothing happens. So there's another way of looking at it.
Connection helps.
And
no, I was just going to say, in all the non-dual philosophies, Zen being one of them, there is that provision that in an instant, by a look, a touch, a hit on the back with a stick, whatever it is, or just insight, there'll be an enlightenment. There'll be in my tradition, it's a full awakening, which is actually the beginning of the spiritual path. Which it's like,
I mean, Sam, I remember Sam used to say we'd be enlightened right this minute if we really wanted to.
But then we've got to live in this human body with all its senses and tricks and confusion.
Yeah, that's why I really like the Yogacara branch of or body of Buddhism, where there's emptiness, but you also have to let go of emptiness, because if you don't let go of emptiness, it becomes a reified thing again. So you grasp it again. So there's something like, so I like that it's a self-canceling practice.
I've got to think about this one, Oliver. I like it because it's the egocentric aspect of the Western esoteric tradition. Yeah, anyway, go on.
And it explains, or at least it made me look deeper in the samskara work we do in Clear Vision, this Yogacara model, because they have this concept of the storehouse consciousness. So they have 8. I think the Buddhists, they added 2 more, which is that storehouse and the ego, little e. It's the manas, they call it. So what they're saying is you have seeds on the rebirth, seeds of energy. So it's not like the seeds of karma, but it's not like the pop karma, like, oh, we're gonna meet again. No, someone talks about it. It's not like, oh, we're gonna see each other in the next time. No, these are seeds. And then when they're kind of unconscious, but they can bear fruit when the right moment arrives. And that's why meditation is key. So you can see the seeds when it's bearing fruit, and your choice will apply to it so that you don't create further action that could perfume again more seeds. So the idea is And they say you can't escape. They have long debates. I read this whole book on is samsara, where enlightenment, when you get enlightened, is it in another place? Is it in another body? But they're saying you can't escape conditioning. So in a way, it can only happen within conditions. You can, but you cannot talk about it. It's in another, the levels of dhyana where this, you're like surfing what's conscious. But while you're here, you're saying, that's why the Mahayana said, enlightenment is here. So that's within this dirty world, this is where it is. There's no other world. You just have to let go of the grasping of this false. So in a way, by removing the illusion, you're just gonna see the reality, and that is it. That's all it is. There's nothing somewhere else in the future. Which is, I was raised Christian Catholic. There's always a teleology with Catholicism. It's which is similar in a way with the clear vision. There's gonna be an end. There'll be a battle between good and evil at the end. And whereas in Buddhism, it's circular. There's no teleology. I'm still wrapping my hand around that.
Well, it's not unlike, it's not unlike the opening of the Bible in the or thereabouts. I can't, I'm a bit rusty on the Bible, but I was raised Catholic as well, went to church every Sunday for 17 years. In the beginning was God. God is in the beginning, is now, never shall be. So really the deathless can be defined in those same, but it's kind of mysterious, isn't it? It's only that there's that duality, the idea that, there's heaven and hell and all the rest of it for the creation, but God is defined as without beginning, middle or end. So nirvana is much the same. Really, dependent origination is like mycelium.
So hang on, there's something Oliver was coming at, and that that I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
Can I add one more to that, Helen, before you?
Okay, go.
Mind help it. So with this, if there is a being, a God that's perfect, that's unchangeable, right? That's the body of immortality, right? It's or the ego in clear vision, capital E. It never changes. Am I right in that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's unborn and undying.
It's the vehicle. Now, things can be imprinted in your ego, in your higher ego.
Mm-hmm.
It's the vehicle that can move through all levels of creation without being gunked. I'm not sure it's unchanging, but completely unchanging. But go on.
We're not talking about the ego. We're talking about Melchizedek.
Higher ego. Anyway.
Or if it's God. So let's say if there's a God, that God is unchanging, or
I don't think it's stating unchanging.
So, or it's immute. It's outside of creation.
In Catholicism, it is, yeah. In Hinduism, it's not.
Yeah. So the Yogacaras are saying, if the only way we can cognize is when the senses something, then we cannot communicate with an unchanging thing.
So would it be true to say the only way we can cognize is to create a dualistic reality?
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done the whole of this conversation. We've dipped in and out of non-dual and dual frameworks. This is in fact the human condition, isn't it, for me?
Yeah.
This is what we do. We try and find a map of for existence, and something that suits us and guides us, and that by its very nature is dualistic. And all the different times in this interview that we've gone into the dualistic metaphors, and we've all also pointed to that which is non-dual, which has been our experience at different times. So that's the human condition for me. That for me, I create a map of life, of existence, to use Jack's thing, that is a guide and a reference point when I'm flowering to my full potential.
I'm coming back to that thing Oliver was saying, that I was trying to get something around. what I heard you say is you can't escape your cloaks or your superastral landscape, to use a clear vision knowledge. You can't escape your culture and your conditioning, right? Now, I'm sure we've all had experiences where we've had moments beyond all of that.
You definitely can.
Yeah, so hang on, you can replace it for a moment, but in context of this thing that we're talking around with Jack, it's a bit on the lines of the form and the formless that we were getting at earlier. I don't know, there's something there. You were touching at it before, Oliver, and around not being able to escape, your cloaks, your cultural environment, the cultural messages and all that. And then if you're going from one to the other, because Jack is still going to be there, right? If he's studying Buddhism, he's Catholic. We've all experienced this in the work we've done, where you're trying to move into a new space, but your conditioning from your childhood and the things, all the beliefs that you've got that you don't know you've got, are upholding a certain reality, which is going to affect Jack's perception of every, cloak he tries to take on, if we're using that terminology. Because he's got his own cultural perception, and then he's going into another cultural perception. And there's something about what I don't know what you were trying to get at, but there was something there.
It's when I say condition, it's just not just the conditioning, it's everything, like your genetics.
Yeah.
From the Big Bang, if there was a Big Bang.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah.
We can't escape, in the sense that once it starts, it has to go its course. It can only be spent. So the only thing we can do is not create more further conditioning that creates suffering. But everything we do will have ripples. Okay, so that's why we have to meditate, so that when we see where the ripples are going, so that we don't create more suffering. While we exist in this plane, it's always like that. We can't. So it's not like if I meditate hard enough, I can rise above this. No, it can't. We're in it, Yeah. The only thing I can do is not grasp it's a bit like in samskara. I see, I have a samskara here. It's causing me to do this. It's gonna play out, but I'm just gonna I'm gonna feel it, but I'm not gonna go into the story. I'm not gonna believe it. But I can't remove it. It's just there,
It's like if you've got brown hair, you've got brown hair, sort of. I know it's not probably the same.
You can color it, but anyway.
You can color it. I'm a blonde, but you've still got brown hair. On that also, like, we did work on timelines quite a lot, Jack, and this is linking in with what Oliver was saying about from the beginning of the Big Bang, if you like, the wave. And Sam used to talk about the fact that you couldn't see, if you saw a person at a moment in time, you might, and you were, say, one of their advisors, you might advise them in a completely wrong way, because if you could see that soul through time, so we're always encouraged to look at each other through time, and you can often feel a wave in someone that's moving somewhere, like a broad wave. And the behavior they're doing right now might look completely and utterly nuts, right? In any logical, rational, reasonable sense of the current world. But when you look at the behavior in the long journey of that soul, sometimes it can look completely perfect. And I'm not sure what that's telling us, but it was linking in with what Oliver was saying about we're on a flow. We're on a,
It's interesting that the first, go on, Jack. Yeah.
Oh, like a trajectory that is creating its own, like, creating its own waves. But Oliver, you seem to be saying that the less waves you create, the better. The more streamlined, I guess, you could be.
No, just be aware of not furthering suffering.
Yeah.
Because whatever you do, it will have effects. We will all have impact. Yeah. It's just lessening it, or making more wholesome, or more.
Yeah. So sorry, Alfred. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, while you were talking about flow, I was just reminded that in the Theravadan sort of material on the insight side of things, the first stage of enlightenment is called stream entry.
Which means?
Well, it means that, after some reflection for my own sort of sanity, I came to the realization that, sure, body is not self, feelings are not self, perceptions are not self, mental formations are not self, consciousness is not self. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's a process. Interdependent processes. The body's made up of a whole lot of organic processes, and our feelings, emotions are in process. As you're saying, they're following a certain flow, a certain unfolding momentum. And stream entry is when you get a snap in the linear continuity of your sense of identity, and there's a realization of the true nature of those interdependent conditioned phenomena. And then you enter into the
have like an
stream of awakening.
You have like an epiphany.
You have, something gets cut off. I talk about, in my own way of thinking, as the difference between being an acolyte or an aspirant and being an initiate. Once you've attained that first stage, you're initiated into the path of awakening. Reversal is impossible. Regression can no longer occur. But for us aspirants and acolytes, we can have experiences along the jhana line where we have sort of, oneness experiences, whatever, but they're conditioned also by the concentration practices. They're not in that field. So one example my Theravadan teacher gave was, you might be a Christian mystic, you might be doing the Lord's Prayer a lot, you might be doing the Rosary, you might be repeating Lord Jesus Christ, Son of David, have mercy on me, over and over again. And this is the same as doing a concentration practice like observing the breath. And then you enter into a deep state, and because you don't have the insight knowledge to recognize how this state arose, its conditional nature, wrong view slips in, and you're thinking you're having an experience of God, and then you start a whole new religion. You're not seeing the dependently originating nature of that consciousness. You're not seeing that it's also cause and effect. At a higher level, you've put your field of consciousness at a resonant level, basically an angelic resonance. If you were to die in that state, you'd probably get born in heaven. And then in Buddhism, that's not a very good outcome, because you're going to be stuck there for 80,000 years thinking that you've made it. Like a rich man who, Donald Trump, you end up with a nice golden palace, but the bloody thing is going to die. It's going to fall apart. It's also subject to death and decay. So the path of progress requires this, this is the really good thing about, your philosophical inquiry, because the essence of our spiritual awakening is the spirit of inquiry, is that you maintain a kind of diligent vigilance. Insight, this is the essence of insight, Vipassana, is that you investigate and inquire into absolutely everything. And the moment you recognize you've identified with something, Krishnamurti put it nicely in a book I never read, but I like the title, Arrival is Death. So I did a practice with one of his students, Vimala Tucker. She did a weekend on the spirit of inquiry. Really stuck with me. And Sadhu Janaka, Upandita, I did 10 days with him. Same thing. This progressive, this strong, this is true science. This is the continuous investigation into the underlying phenomenon of your own experience as a human being, your senses, your consciousness, the whole range, And that's difficult. It's so easy in meditation to arrive at a satisfied state. that retreat I did with Sadhu U Pandita, we're speaking through a translator, not about the third or fourth day, the translator said, because he wasn't, these guys are quite naive at some level when it comes to the West. He said, Sadhu says that some yogis had even taken drugs. Shock, horror. In Burma, you get executed for taking drugs. And he said, when those yogis got to the fourth preliminary insight knowledge and started to experience very good states, he said they were like mules. Sayadaw could not get them to progress. They just wanted to go home. They were happy. They got to where they wanted to be. They'd managed to duplicate their drug experiences and they were feeling pretty high and they were happy. They were high now. I had the same problem because I've done heaps of acid, man. I have this problem myself. And it took me like 10 years of working with clear vision to realize, oh, this transmission from the connections is a teaching for me to take home and practice. It's not something to get high on and just ride and then next experience, please. So this is called spiritual materialism, I think, where we're just addicted to having incredible experiences. This is not a quest for truth. The quest, I mean, it's good, you're addicted to something better than whatever you're normally addicted to. But, we want to, as Oliver's pointing out, begin to recognize grasping and resistance, let go and start investigating.
Like, Alfred, yes, but you've got a hierarchical model in your head with that notion.
Oh, perhaps. Tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me, feed me back.
Well, it's like...
This is what we're here for.
I know. But it's like maybe someone's, the spirit from the void thing, right? Where the notion you just suggested is there's somewhere to arrive. And in the model you were talking about, obviously there is somewhere to arrive. And in clear vision, there's sort of somewhere to arrive too. And, or you're supposed to come to a place where in clear vision where you can do anything, you can be anything and do anything, Jack, in any circumstance. So you've never picked up a computer and you'd be able to sit down and work it out, and you'd use your super astral pathways and your point and sort out what was going on in that computer and in no time, right? Off on your chariot, saving the world kind of
Well, this is a bit like one of our conversations the other day about the difference between male and female energy. I think it's a little bit to do with men like to, climb the mountain.
And our cult leader was a male. I'm
like, but it's non-linear, isn't it?
But I was just coming back to a point there with the more circular religions or circular ways of being, more native earth-based spirituality. It's much more circular than hierarchical, and in it, the person who is choosing to just sit at one level that Alfred was describing and not go higher where the master was trying to get the person to, the more traditional cultures, my understanding is it's not about getting somewhere, getting to the top. It's about being life in your form. It's a different thing. Out in the West, because of what we've been through in the last few thousand years, where everything is hierarchical. Everything's about action. It's about get ahead. It's about where are you going? And whereas when I tune into like the Aboriginal women, for example, and I saw this in a practice in the last couple of days, and don't quote me if this is my experience, okay? So
don't worry, Helen, we're not recording or anything.
I saw that Aboriginal men of high degree have a point, right? They hold the creation in a point above their head and they can see what's going on from that. And then I saw that Aboriginal women hold the creation in a way that every point of their being is the point, right? It's not, it's like the consciousness is everywhere, and they uphold integrity through every point in their being. You could say every cell, right? If you want to put it like that. So instead of having one place, directed, focused, it was also, you could, like, the male is that, the female is that. Could, like, depending on which system you're looking at. But what Alfred was just describing, this climbing the ladder, is a male or is a hierarchical system, as opposed to the person who in the system, it doesn't, like in the more circular system, the tree is as valuable and has as much right to live as I do, right? In a hierarchical system, the people are at the top and the animals and trees and other life forms are below, kind of. You know, I'm being very simplistic here, but
well, it's also a modeling issue, because that's, you know, a way of modeling experience, isn't it? Hierarchically or circular. But when we're dropping into experience, the models are like the menu at the restaurant, you know, that
totally
not really in any way related to the food.
No. Totally, completely. And I get that. Yeah, and you have your experiences, and then you use the model that you've been taught to try and discuss, or, pardon me, analyze your experience. But the experience is the experience.
It's the relationship between theory and experience.
But the model has real.
Sorry,
real effects.
Jack, what's that, Jack?
So in those two like positions there, the Burmese teacher who is trying to get their pupils to go beyond the
no, he's trying to get them to sustain their investigative attentiveness, like that investigative edge. It's not really like going beyond. It's when there's a teaching called the 10 corruptions of insight, and you think, well, what are these terrible things? And they are peace, tranquility, joy, rapture, all these things where you just start to
bliss out,
enjoy it. You start to peace out. Whereas this really exciting, you know, really it's the edge of science. It's the gift of science. It's this inquiry, and then, you know, working out your theory and then testing your theory, and, you know, trial, event, you know, TEFCAS, trial, event, feedback, check, adjust. You keep investigating. It's that journalistic mind where you're not going to just arrive too quickly at, I think this is what Zen's really good at, you know, all these different perspectives. We arrive too quickly at conclusions, and hierarchical models are really bad for that. I agree with you, Helen.
Yeah, but there's like, there's got to be a hierarchical structure to a point, because you've got to get to that point of constant investigation.
Anne's shaking her head.
Yeah, no, Anne's got something.
I think that we're conditioned into hierarchical viewpoints, but I don't think there has to be.
Yes, yeah, but if it's not like a necessity of existence, but for the person who's not constantly in that investigative space,
which is the majority of unawake people.
Yeah, but they've got to like progress, I suppose, and there's like the
people don't really progress. They get conditioned into a certain way of life, and they just keep repeating the same pattern. They think they're doing a lot of different things, but all they're really doing is changing the content on the same very limited repertoire.
Yeah, but it's like the Zen stories of the guys coming and saying like, I'm here to find enlightenment. And they're like,
yeah,
stop looking. You know, it's like, okay, well, how do I stop looking?
But I guess what Jack is pointing to, we do need to. There's a hierarchy of sorts in, like me choosing to go into the Zoom call versus doing other things. You can't escape, because there's like if you compute all the probabilities of things you could do, it's massive. You have to choose.
Mhm.
That's a hierarchy. Why did I choose to go here and not sleep
Is
or
it
do something else?
duality? Is it hierarchy or duality?
No, not just hierarchy in the sense that you rank order the things that I'm gonna do this now and this and that. It's not just it's two. It's you rank order. Yeah.
That's a great example. I'm sitting here, first of all, with Helen's image, and then I didn't rank anything that I wanted to do tonight. I had a choice of watching a gardening show or coming on Zoom. That was my only two choices in my head. But what I was interested to go back to is Helen's imaging, as she's pointed to the point above her head and the points that women include, and that they are everything. Now and we're getting to a point where my head can't get around these things, because if I imagine myself as every cell in my body being receptive and knowing and all-knowing, there is no hierarchy there.
Mm-mm.
There's no hierarchy in that.
Mm-mm.
You know, that's what comes up when you're doing really deep vipassana. You start seeing all those points.
Mm-hmm.
And they're moving like the dots on a TV screen.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Yeah.
begin to see that those instantaneous moments of consciousness that are happening in the trillions at every nerve ending are creating a hologram, which is, you know, reducing itself down to our epistemology, giving us an interpretation of fields of energy. Somehow we can survive in the infinite.
That'd be nice.
I mean, we do, but not your form, because you can't really destroy energy. You just be something else.
Say again, Oliver. What are you observing?
In a way, we do. In a way, we do exist infinitely, because if your energy will just be recycled to something else, you can't really destroy it, really, unless you destroy the whole thing.
Well, that's the essence of non-duality, isn't it? And so we can see that it's just an issue of seeing the unborn and undying nature of the latent potential that can neither be born and die, and seeing the form that it takes. And if we identify with the form, then we are lost in duality. And if we see it as a state of continuous transformation of an eternal.
And that's where the continual transformation part is the part where the continual investigation comes in, because that continual transformation requires a continual investigation if you ever seek to.
The masters of the forests of Thailand, the forest monks, they say on this note that sanya is not panya. So sanya is a Pali word for perception, memory, recognition, long-term memory. So just that word recognize. And then cognition is consciousness. So, you know, on acid sometimes you say pure consciousness experience. You don't recognize anything. There's only cognition. There's no recognition. But panya is that investigation. It's always fresh. Moments never experienced before. It's this particular instantaneous transformation that's never existed before in the universe. It's brand fucking spanking new. And the perception is, you know, that instant 1/49th of a second or whatever it is afterwards, where we relate it to whatever we've experienced before. But that investigation is right on that edge.
So, sorry, go Helen. No. I was saying, like, could you do, I guess, could you do a PhD of that continual investigation, dipping in and out of different
That would have to be the essence of your PhD. That's the nature of a PhD.
And it's the framing up. If you frame it up like that, the success will depend on how you articulate the structure that you're working in.
I expect that the greatest difficulty would be putting some of these concepts into words.
Or I would ask you.
Oh, gone.
I was gonna say, if I was to do a PhD, I would ask myself, what is the one question that I keep asking my life? Maybe you should ask that yourself, Jack, because that's the whole point. You know, it's not like what is that one question that keeps recurring in your life? Maybe that's what you should do a PhD on.
Right.
Yeah.
Great thought. Yeah.
Don't start with the method. Start with the question. You know? Yeah.
Mm.
There's always a great way to bring that question into perspective too, Jack. In Lao Tzu and Tao Te Ching, I remember a couple of quotes, and he said, "Every day, a man or woman of the way knows they're going to die. The ordinary person knows they're going to die, but a man or woman of the way feels it." So one shaman suggests that you keep death on your shoulder as your advisor, and realize that there is no linear continuity, and that, you know, this question needs to be held within the context of your guaranteed death.
Do you know what the question for your life is?
Death brings everything to perspective. We don't have time. We all think, because we're living on this egocentric linear fantasy, that we're immortal. We're not. We don't know if we're going to take our very next breath. We need to live with a certain knowledge of that.
Jack, do you know what question you constantly ask in life?
I don't think I'd be able to formulate it in words at the moment.
Yeah.
I think that in and of itself would take, and that's probably something to. I mean, it would definitely be worth just going over and really sort of meditating on that question before getting started. I'd
like Oliver to reframe that, actually, because it was so well asked, Oliver. Could you just ask that again? Could you posit that point again?
Is this what's one question that recurs in your life, and wouldn't that be the one you want to do a PhD on, because you're really curious about it, you know?
Yeah.
And isn't that implied in the name of your podcasts? What's the name of your podcasts?
Exploring existence.
So isn't that implied? What is the nature of existence? Isn't that the question behind it?
Yeah, I think that would be getting very close, Anne. Yeah.
What the fuck is going on here?
I don't know. Have you worked it out yet?
The only thing I've come to a certain knowledge of is I have absolutely no fucking idea.
The other thing,
the unknown is far, 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 far bigger than the known.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got this thought that keeps coming, and this is one of the things that is going to be interesting with you doing this, Jack, is because you're going to have an ontological framework for your PhD. Like, I didn't know what mine was until quite a way through, and then I realized it was actually resting on Plato. But because you're trying to do something across different systems, it's going to be like it's going to have, I don't know what it'll be, right? But it'll have to be something about the fact that existence can be known or something through inquiry or something. I don't know. Has anyone got any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Have some.
That there's like a reasonable or academic level of examination.
Or John Vervaeke, do you know him in the YouTube world? But he's also a professor.
What's his name?
Sorry?
John Vervaeke.
No.
So he says that his map is different kinds of knowing. So there's a participative agent in the arena, perspectival, taking perspective, and then there's the doing know-how, knowing, and then there's the propositional, propositional is what we're doing when you're discussing ideas on the level of propositions. But there are things that you can only do by doing it in practice. So maybe you can have and there's some things that you have to take perspectives from different religions, for example. So you can't just resolve it in the propositional something.
Yeah.
That's useful. In my head, that would be really useful, what you've just said, Oliver.
Yeah, with him, he does philosophy, he does cognitive science, but he also does Tai Chi Chuan and
type his
meditation.
name in the chat, please, Oliver.
Yeah, I've got it here. It's
Okay.
yeah, he's actually a professor at Toronto.
Canada. Yeah.
Mm.
And he had an amazing, the one I sent you, Helen, the amazing discussion with Forrest Landry, the two of them.
Oh yeah, I haven't read that one. I'll get onto that.
That was like, oh my God, that was like my I'm having brain gasm just listening to this too.
Brain gasm.
Forrest Landry is like a mentat. If you read the June novels, he's like a mentat. It's like, because he is a programmer, his mind's like, but it's like so precise. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. What did he say about love in one of our discussions, Oliver, before he was saying? What was
love is that which enables choice.
Oh yes. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
So that's Forrest Landry.
Yeah.
Love is that which enables choice.
And he said something in that, the one with John Vervaeke, he said, the reason we're fucked right now is strategy is overcoming the domain of strategy, culture. So he likes so instead of dialectics, he likes triplicates, strategy, culture, and values. So those are the triplicates. What's happening in the world right now is strategy dominates everything. That's what everyone asks before they do anything.
Strategy, culture, and values.
Yeah. So he's saying the right order of the circle, they co-create each other in a circle, but the right way, or the right way of, you start from the culture, and from the culture they derive their values, and then once you have your values, then you create the strategy to meet. But now with everyone, now when you're starting a startup, what's your strategy? Do you know what I mean? That's why we're like this. We're like optimizing a lot of things towards what?
It's
it's like
action.
This technology, but towards what end? What's the value? Or where's the culture spark? We're in a culture war.
The end is to be able to sell it as a startup, that's the end.
So yeah, it's a strategy again. It's a weird thing.
Do it for as long as you can until someone buys it off you.
They want an exit strategy before they actually produced anything.
Yeah.
I'm not much help on this scholastic front, by the way, guys. I've never taken any kind of academic direction.
I don't know, Alfred. I've found you've got a real way with words. Been writing down quotes left, right, and center.
Samuel pointed that out to me. People say that to me sometimes. That, you can't see the back of your own head. I like. Are we doing a kind of artist thing as well, aren't we?
What do you mean in this little gathering?
Didn't you? What is it again? A salon, philosophy, art.
Salon. Philosophy, art, spiritual people where they gathered. That's what it's about.
I can't take my guitar out and sing a song off the top of my head.
You could. Absolutely. It all is welcome in a salon.
Sum our conversation up in a song.
Somebody bring out the absinthe.
That's it.
So yeah, we probably, if we're going to do it again, we probably need a name or something, but that's all right.
Yes, the joy of spiritual tourism.
That's the name of our salon, is it? Who knows what we'll discuss at other times.
Is it all discussion, or will we, dip in and out of different practices? Maybe we could do a bit of, maybe you could do some research each time we do this, Jack, and you could guide us through something you've discovered. So we might do some Pentecostal I joined a Pentecostal group one time when
Speaking
I was
in tongues.
Hallelujah, brother. I was in there for 3 weeks until my friend who introduced me to clear vision many years later found me in the Christian coffee shop, gave me some acid and said, "These bastards aren't getting you, mate."
Alfred, you're the spiritual tourist. You're the Anthony Bourdain of spirituality.
Anthony who?
Bourdain of...
I don't know that. Another interesting character is John Grinder, co-developer of NLP. We did a course with him called The Prerequisites of Personal Genius. And a lot of what we're discussing was in that modeling. He talks about the minimum requirement for accessing the genie within is a triple description. So you need to be able to map your own subjective reality. And then we had to sort of anchor it to something. So I anchored it to a telegraph pole. And then we had to be able to be like a fine actor and follow someone for, literally walk a mile in another person's shoes, follow their micromuscular movements, their breathing, their physiology, and get totally into their state. The reason we had to anchor our own first position is once you drop into the other person's second position, the change in perception is so dramatic, it's like taking drugs. It's quite fucking intense. And then you need a third perspective called director's position, where you can look at the relationship between the two completely different epistemologies. Later on, we developed a fourth position called the helicopter view, where you can, I like doing that at Clear Vision when we're doing cathedral building, where you can tune into everyone's individual column of spirit, tune into their consciousness, and instead of tuning into one other consciousness, you get the collective intelligence of the entire group, which is the direction of Helen's work, I think.
That's your methodology, Jack. You should just transcribe what Alfred is saying. That was one idea. and then look for the sources later on in the library.
Yeah, that's right. That's what Grinda said to me one day. I asked me a trainer, exactly, this is what you do. You do experience first, description later. It's called experiential learning. Just put yourself into the experience, drown in it, have no idea what the fuck is going on, and then make meaning of it.
So Alfred will take you. He's your first.
Oh, I'm dangerous. I was doing that course.
He could give you three, because hang on, Alfred, if you're going to do it, like you probably should do one that explores psychedelics or something. I don't know which one, but there's
Cambo.
Okay.
Cambo, what are you calling it? What did he say?
Cambo.
What is that? Cambo.
You burn yourself with frog poison.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Well, that one's anyway, you could there's ayahuasca and there's all sorts of mushrooms.
DMT.
And
psilocybin.
Yeah.
They all have only one function, and that is to silence the internal dialogue. Some of those shamans would do, you can do all kinds of spiritual practices.
Don't reduce everything to one thing, Alfred.
It does. I hate that. I know it's reductionist, but you've got to silence the fucking thing. Nothing else works. One of the things you can do, Jack, I read, and it's an extreme practice, but you climb a very tall tree with a rope, and tie the rope around your feet, and then a rope around the branch, and then you hang upside down in the tree all night.
Oh yeah.
That can work.
You have an aneurysm, then your thought will stop.
This stuff is dangerous, This is what Helen was saying earlier, there is the danger of you really, the interface to look at here is the interface between belief and identity. Because beliefs are so insidious. Like you just believe stuff without even knowing you believe it because it got embedded when you were like 3. And then your identity is sort of just sitting on top of that whole structure of beliefs. Your beliefs are producing your emotions, your behaviors, your speech, your perception of the world. And when we start investigating at this level, and you start questioning your beliefs and questioning your identity. Who are you? and so we had to anchor ourselves to the tree so you could come back to, like Helen keeps saying, remember, wherever you are in the middle of all that, remember your first position. You need to have a good sense of self. And so that you get to the realization at some sort of intermediary stage, it's very useful that identity is not a thing, it's a function, and that you can fucking play with it. You can be anyone you want to be.
It's coming back to the cloaks, and it's also coming back to the question we had earlier, which was about, would you go mad, Jack? Because if you don't have a strong sense of yourself in some way, and you break the relationship between beliefs and identity through exploring literally completely different states of consciousness, then God alone knows, that's the thing. But it's also
what Carl Jung said killed Wilhelm Reich.
Hang on, sorry, Alfred, let me just finish this thought. Enlightenment and I know enlightenment's a loose word, but it exists in the breach, you see. So it's either enlightenment or madness. when you break the links between identity and beliefs.
Yeah, if you go too far down like the rabbit holes without having a proper grounding,
without having a something anyway.
What happens, Jack, is your background awareness separates out from all the processes of your being, and you begin to realize that you are not your body, you're not your feelings, you're not your perceptions. You can't even say you're the background awareness, but your standpoint shifts to that non-dualistic raw awareness.
Yeah, but I wonder though that this danger is a potential, even if you're just doing one thing, though. No,
it's danger. A superficial epistemology is always dangerous. All you need is what Samuel calls dimensionality. So long as you can take all of these dimensions and hold them in your awareness, you're fine. But if you've got a very
say that again. If you can take all
these dimensions of being, which are fathomless, and hold them in awareness without identifying with any of it, you're fine. The minute your identity is a useful function, it's a cultural necessity, really. You need to be able to present some kind of identity. You can probably do without it, but no one would know what the fuck you're doing. You wouldn't be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
Which is fine for enlightened masters, but the rest of us, it's quite useful to see identity as a worthwhile function, and also to begin to examine the roots of our beliefs. So that underlying awareness is what you're going to sort of separate out to. Everything separates out. Your instincts, your body, your functions. You begin to see with clear awareness all these processes simply as conditioned phenomenon arising within the human continuum, within the human, whatever we call this, range of experience, which is vast, by the way. This is the thing. On my first acid trip, I did this. I sat there all night like this. See this? Hold your little pinky finger like that, and you can just see the little tip of your pinky finger.
Oh, yeah.
I began to realize I was living in the tip of my pinky finger. And then everything else was suddenly revealed to me.
But I think you've got just as much a chance of that happening through an acid trip or a poor guide leading you down a deep meditative path.
I'm just saying it's dangerous to this. Look, I was doing that course and I was staying at a friend's place and he was there with his girlfriend. He was outside. I was sitting on the couch relaxing after a full day of intensive, and she asked me what we'd been doing that day, and I described what we were doing: first attention, second attention. She said, "That's interesting. How do you do second attention?" I described it. She started doing second attention on me. 4 minutes in, she screamed. The room vanished. Her entire consciousness scattered. We're in some sort of space where there's no human perception at all. And it took me like 2 hours to reconstruct her consciousness. The room came back. She looked at me in a shocked state and said, "Never do that to me again." We're talking about dramatic changes of consciousness.
My love,
What's that, Anne?
Anne?
I'm going to love you.
I was thinking we probably need to wind up.
Nearly 2 hours that we've really still.
It's getting a bit ravey now. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So nice to see you again, Anne.
Well, let us just ask Jack. Jack, have you got something?
So Helen,
Yeah, that's been extraordinarily helpful for multiple reasons. So just like conceptualizing some of the ideas, trying to distill some of the thoughts, and giving even giving just some nice, even just giving some words to questions. So there's a lot for me to think about there, and it has been very, very helpful. So thank you all for your time.
Oh, it's been fun. I've enjoyed it too. So
what a pleasure. What a pleasure.
yeah.